Hello and welcome to the Wolves Report. I'm Ryan Lester and thank you for joining us for episode 77, where tonight we will analyse the Newcastle game and the players, talk about another VAR decision, take your questions and look ahead to Saturday's game against Sheffield United. We have a full house tonight, delighted to be joined by club captain Mark Knock, director of football Chris Tyler, and we have spent all of the Christmas budget in advance to bring liquid gold voice Mike Taylor back on the Wolves Report. Straight to business, lots to talk about. Mike, fascinating game on Saturday, entertaining. Wolves probably a bit unlucky, but I'd love to get your take on Wolverhampton Wanderers 2, Newcastle United 2.
Well, I really enjoyed the game. I think that's the first thing to say about it. And I know there's a lot of controversy, and I dare say we'll come to VAR. But there was a lot to enjoy about it. And I have enjoyed the Wolves games of late more than in recent seasons. So that's one thing. They've been entertaining. Wolves look like a team that can make something happen. And obviously it was building up to a big finish. Up to the whole thing turns on Pedro Neto's injury, as you all saw, which burst the bubble really, because at that point it did feel like Wolves might well go on and win it. I quite fancied them to win it at that stage. They had the momentum with them. They obviously had the crowd with them. And they had pushed Newcastle back. It was a really well-worked game in a lot of ways that overcome that the decision just before half-time. They'd come back very strongly in the second half. So although it was a point, it was only a point, and I sensed when we asked Gary O'Neill afterwards, what did you make of that? He was tussling with himself before he even came up with an answer. Mixed emotions about a point against Newcastle in a game where you've been behind twice. It's not bad, really.
Knocky, it's, as Mike said, it's a fantastic point, but there are so many positives to take from the performance against a Champions League side.
Yeah, I'm with Mike. I was delighted with it. I really enjoyed the performance. I enjoyed the setup. I think tactically we got it spot on. They were missing a few players, which is obviously going to affect them, and they played midweek, so it was an opportunity for us to get a positive result out of the game. We scored a couple of really good goals. I thought Lamina's header from the corner was exactly what you want to see from a player like him. I don't think he physically imposed himself enough inside the penalty areas, so it was nice to see him kind of bully someone out of the way and then nod us in. And Hwang's goal was absolutely top class, wasn't it? So there were two really good goals. I know we're going to speak about VAR, but we all know how important that moment was. And I completely agree. I could only see one winner after we equalised. It looked to me like Newcastle had gone. I felt the legs had gone. It was the 2 games in a week I think they were struggling with. We had more energy, but as soon as Neto went down, you could almost feel the atmosphere dropped. The players' heads kind of dropped a little bit because I think they knew we were on the ascendancy. So it was a little bit disappointing in that sense that we haven't won the game, but I've absolutely took your hand off for a point before kickoff. So really good. Substitutions are positive. I think Doyle, he's starting to look a really good player. He affected the game when he came on and kind of calmed things down for us. And it was just an all-round really good performance. I was absolutely delighted. I was gutted to be 2-1 down because I don't think they deserved to be 2-1 down at any point. I thought they played really well. But loads of spirit, loads of character, and what could be a really important point come the end of the season.
Tyler, we talked about not having a style or a plan, but it feels like we've got our Wolves back again, Tyler, and we've talked about having an identity, and we feel it looks like now we've got a team and we know what they're doing again.
Yeah, it was what we talked about the first couple of games, and in hindsight, we were probably a bit harsh, weren't we? Because we'd only given them a couple of games, but yeah, the style, the identity is there for all to see, and I would like it's just enjoyable watching Wolves again, isn't it? And I get the feeling or the sense that teams don't want to come to Molineux again. It's not a nice place again, is it? All of a sudden we're intense, we've got pace. I thought that defensively they were superb. There's a couple of clips around how they were trying to win the ball back and blocking and every man on the line. And that's what ultimately us fans will buy into. We'll buy into performances like that. And Mike's right, even for Neutral, it must have been a great game to watch. It was probably a bit nerve-wracking for us, wasn't it, as fans? But it was everything you want from an evening Premier League game, wasn't it? 2 good teams going hell for leather at each other, and ended up as a stoppage, as a draw, didn't it? But yeah, I'll just echo what the guys have said, really. But yeah, to answer your question, we do now have that clear, concise way of playing, and it suits our players, and we're playing to our strengths now.
I'm not going to say disappointment, Mike, but we'll come on to VAR in a bit. But to come away from Newcastle thinking Wolves probably should have won that game, that's a massive step from where they've come from the latter end of last season.
It is, and I think it speaks to a lot of things. It speaks to just the belief in the players, first of all, because the players don't look tentative anymore. You know, they look as though they think they're always in the game, even when they're up against it. And sometimes they are going to be up against it because there are some better teams around than Wolves, and Newcastle are one of them. You know, we can all see that. That's not contentious. The results tell us that. But Wolves now know that they can take them on. There's an outlet, even if they're under pressure. If all else fails, you know, you can break glass and hit the ball towards Neto, and something might happen. And it's different with respect. And I love watching Adama Traore. I thought he was terrific fun, great entertainment. But when they've used Neto in a similar way as an outlet ball, you actually think, yeah, and something might happen. As a result, there might well be an end of it. And look how eager the other players are to go and chase up the field as well, to make sure that if something does happen, they're there to pick up on it. You know, Hwang, how many times has he done that? Chasing up the field because he's been told, you know, there's a thing to go for, or there's a possibility that something will happen. And Gary O'Neill came out with it, and he summed it up very well after one of the recent games when he was just asked the straight question, why are you getting, you know, a tune out of Pedro Neto now that hasn't been there for the last couple of years? He said, I've just told him I back him to beat his man. And I want him to beat his man. And every time, no questions, I don't care if you lose the ball, I want you to take him on. And next time, take him on. And the next time, take him on. And no other thought. And you can see what a difference that's made to Neto. If the message that's coming to you, and presumably to other players, is don't worry about losing the ball. If you're got a chance to attack, have a go. Because, you know, the defender's got to get lucky every time. Neto only has to get lucky once out of 10 and something happens. So that energy, that knowing you've got that backing, you can see the difference it's made to the team. And that's not to criticise any other way of doing it or done previously, because there's been reasons why you'd want to be cautious given the situation that Wolves have been in. But I think you can see the benefit of just being encouraged to take some risks. And everything then feeds off that.
Tyler, I would say, I mean, what Mike said about Neto there, he's bang on, and I think that's been made public about him backing him to beat his man. It doesn't matter because he's only got to do it once, but that seems to be a belief installed across the team, not just Neto. There's a team now full of players that believe again. They're tracking back, they're winning their tackles, they're playing football. Wolves are fun to watch again, but they look dangerous as well.
Yeah, really dangerous. I think, like you said, we're probably disappointed not to go on and win it. And, you know, if you'd offered me that a few weeks ago, I'd bit your hand off. I can't believe the transformation in Hwang. You know, he looks deadly, doesn't he? That goal was just an absolute joke. If a Salah's doing that or a Haaland, it's all over the media, isn't it? The composure he had. Neto looks sharp. I think Kuna tops the stats for successful dribbles this season, and he's not even one we're really talking about. I mean, if he had an end product, crikey, what a player he'd be. And that's not a criticism, by the way, but if he gets those stats up with goals and assists, you know, the world's his oyster, isn't it? So, you know, Doyle comes on, impacts the game for the second week in a row. Boubacar played instead of Gomez. All of a sudden, there's options, there's, you know, different ideas. I'm sure we'll come on to who might replace Neto, but the squad's confident, like you said, so you'd hope the player that does come in is also, you know, bringing with that confidence as well. Sasa had an impact when he came on, although he didn't score. So it's exactly what you want, isn't it? All your players being involved and, you know, having an input on the game.
Lockie, let's move on to the goals, and a player that we're all fans of. I think even Tyler gave him a 10 out of 10 on Saturday. Absolutely delighted for Mario Lemina to head home and grab an equaliser. It was almost a complete game for a player that we would admit isn't someone that's going to open a team up, but he found himself in space. He's got the strength. He's won the space. He's won the header, and he's equalised with a fantastic goal for Wolves.
Yeah, I mean, you know my feelings on Lemina. I think he's absolutely
Tell us more.
top draw. I think he's a player that we were lucky to get in a sense, because I think he's capable of playing at a higher level than we're competing at the moment. He's very disciplined, very organised. I think anyone who plays with him looks a better player because they're alongside him. My only criticism of him would be he doesn't look dangerous in opposition penalty areas, and for a bloke of his size and strength and just his physical presence, he should be contributing more goals for me, especially from set pieces. So it was nice to see him really. I think it was Trippier who was marking him. It was nice to see him kind of force him out the way and bury the header in the way he did. And again, I know Tyler touched on it with Cunha. If he could add a final ball to his game, well, if Lamini could add goals to his game, then he probably becomes the absolute complete midfielder for us. But yeah, I'm a massive Lamina fan. He was one of the major reasons that our fortunes changed for me.
I know Max Kilman's got the captain's armband, but Mario feels like another captain on the pitch, doesn't he? He's with
Definitely,
the way he puts himself about. He's in for every tackle. He's snarling. He's taunting players. I think he taunted the Man City keeper after we scored. He's someone the fans just buy into. He's got a bit of everything, and I'm delighted, and Tyler in the group chat gave him a 10 out of 10 as well. So we know Mario Lemina's played well when Tyler drops a 10 in there. Mike, Wolves' equalising goal. It was a really special moment and a brilliant bit of football. And we're going to go through the player ratings, but it's such, for me, that's going to be such an underrated goal. Toti Gomez is not supposed to do that. Hwang Hee-chan with a chop with his left foot and cut inside. It's such a brilliant goal. It might look simple on a replay on the TV, but the more I watch it, the more I'm in love with that goal. It's such a well-worked piece.
It speaks to the confidence that's been instilled in the players. You say for Totti to have a go at that, because I know he's not one you'd necessarily have down as being a great ball player.
That's why I've asked you and not Tyler.
For all his defensive skills. But, he was game for having a go. And it's funny what you can turn up, when the momentum is with you, players can suddenly find to do things. And it was all in an instant. Hwang's just alert. You can see why managers like to pick him. And it's taken a while, longer than I thought it would, for fans to be won over by him. And obviously he's been held back by injuries and things like that over his time with Wolves. But he's enjoying it, and he fancies. He's not afraid to have a go. He chases around hard. You can see why managers are keen to give him opportunities. Lopetegui had him down as a first pick and was singling him out when he was talking to us and said, nobody's talking about Hwang. I want to talk about him. When he first came in, before he had the next injury last spring, he played in all the early league games under Lopetegui. You can see why, because he's game, because he keeps running, and he's prepared to try things. He runs into places where he thinks the ball might come to. That's what he's been asked to do. But it's one thing to be asked to do it. It's another to have the confidence in your game to take it on under the spotlight. And that's terrific. But that's part of what's clearly coming through the whole team. But to see Totti joining like that was tremendous larks. Good for him.
It was such a great goal, and there was almost an ooh in the stadium when you saw Totti drop the shoulder, go one way, muscle his way past, and then does a reverse passing. That's one thing. But then Hwang has sent Dan Burns to the chip shop. He's cut him with his left and finished it. It's such a beautiful goal, and the noise was welcoming for such a brilliant goal. So yeah, you can see by the smile on my face, I'm still enjoying that goal now. But while we're talking through the team, then let's go through the performances. Despite there being 4 goals, Tyler, Jose Sarr didn't really have a lot to do, and the one thing he probably should have done better probably cost Wolves a goal.
There's no probably about it. He's at fault for the goal, isn't there? We're talking about him again, aren't we? We probably thought we'd got over it. You don't talk about top goalkeepers as often as we talk about Sarr, unfortunately. And again, you don't want to be too critical, but it's bread and butter, that is. He's just got to come and catch the ball. There's no excuse for me.
Do you think he should be punching, like coming out and absolutely clearing it out?
Should Pope have punched it when we scored? It's one of them, isn't it? I think that's a catch. A goalkeeper in this level should just come and eat up all day long. But yeah, apart from that, he hasn't really had a save to make, hasn't had a lot to do. We're seeing shoots of improvement with him, aren't we? But he can't keep making these mistakes. And it's all well and good as hammering VAR, but I think Sarr's got off quite lightly for that mistake, to be honest, because for me, it's a bit of a shocker, to be brutally honest.
Not that we're here to credit Newcastle United players, but I think there was some smart backing in by their players that put him out of the way. And if that's a Wolves player that's done that, I'm quite happy. So yes, you should be doing better, because if you're a goalkeeper can use your hands, you should have the advantage anywhere in the box. But I think there's some dark arts there by the Newcastle players that forced that opportunity. Nocky, moving on to Nelson Semedo.
Did his job. I don't think he was spectacular, but I don't think he was poor either. He seemed to be a little bit more conservative in how he played, not quite so advanced. I think that was probably part of the game plan, just to make sure that we were solid and didn't give anything away, because they've got some pace in behind. But yeah, didn't do anything wrong. Was there, was efficient. Just you bang bog standard 7 out of 10 for me.
Mike, moving on to the man we didn't know who had magical feet, Toti Gomez.
Well, he deserves extra marks for that. He's another player I enjoy seeing in the team because he's prepared to have a go. He throws himself in there defensively, and now he can see he's prepared to get up the field and have a go. He's a threat at a set piece. So, yeah, there are occasions when he's still a little bit raw, but not as much as last season. So there were times last season when I felt it was slightly hands over the eyes when he was in the team. I don't feel that now. So it's a step forward, and he should be feeling 10 feet tall after creating that game for that goal for Hwang, and I hope he is.
Yeah, the more I think about it as well, how on earth did he find himself in the right wing position to be in a position to be taking people on? I know it was a set piece, but to find himself in an attacking position, the confidence through that guy must be going through the roof. And good for him as well.
I bet that beating that man just happened before he even thought about it.
Yeah.
But the very fact that you're in that frame of mind to be able to do that, rather than, because the safety first option is we check, we pass, we keep, we keep possession, give it to somebody else. But there was a bit in him that, I'm ready to have a go. And then I bet it happened before he even realised what he was doing. And that's great. Good for him. He's a fun footballer to watch, and I'm all for those entertainers. I like him.
Absolutely. Slalom past them Newcastle players like they weren't there. That's something I never thought I'd be saying. Nocky, moving on to the best £3.5 million Wolves have ever spent in the form of Craig Dawson.
I don't think it was one of his better games, in all honesty. I thought he was a little bit unconvincing in the first half, kind of let a little bit too much space in. The gaps between the defence was a little bit too wide. Rectified that second half and looked pretty solid, but didn't do anything wrong in particular. I just don't think he was his imperious best for me, but it was still a decent performance, especially in the second half.
Tyler, moving on to his partner again, Max Kilman, had a bit of strapping around his knee. Well, I wasn't sure if it was hamstring, but apparently it was his knee. But a reasonable game from Max, I thought.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was pretty good, to be fair. I think you've got to probably almost, we've talked about it before, see those three a bit more as a unit, don't you? Individually, they've got their strengths and weaknesses, but I think as a unit, I think someone touched upon it. I don't remember Sarr having to make a save, and Newcastle are the top scorers in the division, or one of them.
Yeah, that's excellent.
The goals are both self-inflicted, a mistake that then led to a penalty. I don't remember them having much out. Longstaff flashed one wide early doors, but that was it for me. So I think you've got to look at them as a trio, and to keep a team like Newcastle so quiet in regards to chances, I thought was outstanding, really.
Just asking the three of you, looking at the team, it looked like it was wing-backs, but Semedo didn't really come forward, and Ait-Nouri was more forward. So at times it looked like a 4-4-2. I mean, what was your feeling? Because it was bespoke, but it certainly wasn't wing-backs, and it was really strange because obviously Ait-Nouri was getting really involved. Semedo not so much. Mike, what was your take from that?
I'm glad you brought this up because obviously we have to sort of read the team news out when it comes out in formations, and it's beginning to trouble me a bit because I noticed, and I keep comparing it with my friend Liam Keane in the Express and Star and various other ones, and he finally ends up with a different formation than what I've got. So I had them down as starting with a back three at the weekend. But early in the second half, we picked up in the commentary and said, well, they're definitely now a 4. At this point, I reckon I'm pretty much hanging out on the fact they're now a 4. But I couldn't quite make my mind up when they went from one to the other, because I'm sure they started as a 3. And trying to think about it, I think I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole thinking about this over the last 48 hours, and they end up sort of lopsided with the whole thing sort of a bit skewish, but sort of pointing at Pedro Neto. The idea of them being a back 4 is, as you were just saying, Semedo is effectively right back, and then Totti's more or less left back, so that Aït-Nouri's on the left side of midfield, and that's sort of a 4-4-2. But actually, what they're doing is every time they get the ball, their first thought is, can we find Pedro? So the sort of the whole thing sort of pointing at 45 degrees. And then I thought, I think I'm probably losing it here. I think this is now probably nonsense. But it sort of felt like it was sort of 4-4-2, but a bit of an... Anyway, whatever it did, it seemed to discombobulate Newcastle, and it certainly did me. So I've no idea what I'm going to read out when I get to Sheffield on Saturday, to be honest.
Well, hopefully you're describing all of Wolves' 5 goals in the first half, Mike. But
well, I look forward to that. But before 3, when the team news drops at 2:00, and Daz said, "What's the team?"
Well, I'll tell you who's playing, Daz, but don't know where they are.
Yeah,
but isn't it nice though that Wolves are that fluid that it starts? Yes. It could be a 3, it could be a 4, and there is a certain flow about the play. Wolves look like they have a pattern. Tyler's mentioned this, that we've got an identity again, and it's nice to see. So yeah, it was a question for the floor, because and sometimes, like you, I was like, is that a 4? Is it a 3?
I think that's a bigger point. That's an important bigger point, is the fact that they can be flexible, because, and I've mentioned this a couple of times on the radio already, that the message that came from Bournemouth about Gary O'Neill was that he's not led by what the opposition are doing, but he's keen to react and make his selection, trying to read what the opposition are doing and cope with it, rather than just saying, well, this is how we play and we'll just deal with it from there. Yeah. And obviously the Manchester City game, where there was a bespoke plan that worked, that's a particular example that we can hold up to now. But I think he's obviously a bit of a deep thinker about it. And without saying he wants to be entirely dictated to by the opposition, I think there's somewhere in the middle, which is, we're going to pick a team sensibly with the intention of how we're going to stop the opposition and move around. Obviously, we all saw on the telly last week a bit of that thinking about his plan specifically for Bournemouth. So rather than saying, I am beholden to a back 3 or a back 4 or whatever, that suggests agile thinking. And then we've seen that during the game as well. You've already mentioned about, clever substitutions. He seems to be a quick thinker so far.
Yeah, he's after probably a ropey middle patch to his short spell. He's turning a few heads. His tactical analysis on the Monday Night Football was fantastic, and the results are there backing up his thoughts, really. So yeah, he's been Wolves unbeaten in 5 in the league. I didn't think I'd be saying that for quite a while, but fantastic. Tyler, moving on to the unfortunately injured Pedro Neto.
What more can you say? Just borderline unplayable at times, isn't he? And I think it's another assist from the corner. It's just such a shame, isn't it, with the injury? I mean, I think he's sort of come out and said he's going to be out for 2 weeks. It's going to be more than that if it's a hamstring injury, We're probably looking 3 or 4, aren't we, in all reality? And that's a massive miss. But at least it's not, the recurrence of his knees and the real bad injuries he had. But just such a shame. The opposition players are terrified of him, aren't they? You can tell. Run out of adjectives. I think we all question, can he get back to those levels he was showing 2 or 3 years ago? And I think we all know the answer now, don't we? Can we keep him? Will be the big question. Let's hope, because his legs are made of poppadoms, there's a chance he sees the season out. But I think he gets into near enough any Premier League team at the moment.
If you're roasting Man City defenders for goals and you're putting assists against Newcastle on the Champions League side, I mean, at the start of the season, he looked as fit, as strong as he's ever been. But as Mike touched on then, he looks like the manager now has installed a belief. It doesn't matter if you lose it. As Mike said, you've only got to beat a man once. And if you lose it 10 times, that once, we're probably going to score a goal. The belief that Pedro Neto has now, up until his injury, and hopefully he's back soon, obviously, I reckon it'll be around the international break. I don't think I've ever seen Pedro Neto. We talked about Pedro. Will he come back like he was before? Pedro Neto has never looked this good, in my opinion.
And it's the fact we were all hammering him, weren't we, when he was getting the ball, turning inside, checking, playing it back. There's none of that now, is there? His first thought, I'm going to beat you. First thought is to get it and just go and drive. And for me, that's the biggest change we've seen under O'Neill, is that we were so bored and we were so sick of checking back, centre back. Start again. Like Toto would have done. I think, again, Mike mentioned it again. I can see why you get Mike on the show. Ryan is pretty good. But it's the biggest completely changed. Those front three now, when they get the ball, all they're thinking about is spinning and giving the opposition.
Directed, aren't they?
Whereas before, it was too comfortable. We were too easy to play against. It was too safe. And that, for me, is the biggest change. And Neto's the one that shows it as much as anyone, really.
I hope Pedro's back soon. It's a real test on Saturday to see what Wolves will do. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I'm delighted to see Pedro back now. Hopefully he doesn't go in January. We shall see, but let's enjoy him while he's here, because when he's like this, he's got the confidence to beat any defender, as he's shown so far. Nocky, moving on to another wonder dribbler. If he was left back, left wing back, left midfield, I'm not really sure. Ryan Ait-Nouri.
Yeah, another good performance, very solid. Was definitely the more advanced of the two, and I think Mike's touched on why that is. He just looks a very confident player. I think he's got a manager who believes in him now. He's very vocal about how good he thinks he is, and that's, he's clearly a confidence player, and I can see him. I can see the improvements in him. I think Tyler touched on it. He's just made those little changes, those little 5 and 10% that have all added up. He's gone. Shows have never been better now, has it? He's just making those little changes, isn't he? Those little 5-10% that have affected so many different players. And Ait-Nouri in particular, I think it's going to be one to watch now, because I can only see him getting better and better.
I thought he might be in a battle with Hugo Bueno.
Yeah.
For a sort of left back position, because I think Bueno probably is a better left back, but
yep.
Ait-Nouri wants to go forward, and he's happier going forward, and that's where you get the best out of him. Somebody's asked me about Bueno earlier in the week on social media, saying, because he does seem to have just disappeared off the radar in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So we'll see if we can find out that from Gary O'Neill at the press conference this week, because I still think he's a good player, but Ait-Nouri is a different player, and he's adding something different. We were getting on fine without you.
We've given Mike the job, Ryan.
The last 45 seconds.
I've no idea what happened there.
You'll have to click online. It was great, but anyway, I don't care what these two. Never mind what these two said about you. I think you do a good job. But,
for anyone listening on the podcast version, I just cut out of the online. And obviously, we do it live. I dropped out, and they're all having fun without me. So yeah, this is episode 77 of the Wolves Report with BBC WM's Mike Taylor, club captain Mark Knock, director of football Chris Tyler, and part-time host Ryan Lester. As you were, Mike Taylor.
I was merely adding to points about Ait-Nouri, and at the start, I did wonder whether he would get in very much ahead of Bueno, but he's doing a different job to what Bueno would be doing. So whether Bueno has a fitness issue or not, as far as I know, he hasn't. We'll see what we can find out this week. But Ait-Nouri is justifying his play, so good for him.
We've finished the player reviews now, mate. We're on to Sheffield United and the scores.
Oh, we've missed that about half an hour of the show. They're in big trouble.
We just clicked it.
Moving on to the centre midfield. Mike, Boubacar Traoré. I was surprised he stayed on at Bournemouth, but I can understand why he played against Newcastle, because the guy has got a phenomenal engine. Before he joined Wolves, I think he had the second or third best pressing stats in European football. You can see why he's playing in a midfield 2, if it is a midfield 2 in a 4-4-2, but I don't think it was his best game on Saturday.
No, I don't think it was, but I think you may be onto something there where you're talking about the specific job, and it was a job for that stage in the game. And Claire Hakeman, the former Wolves player who was with us as the summariser on the commentary the other night, made a very good point in the second half. And about the time, early in the second half, he brought Doyle on. And I thought Doyle might have started, because I was really impressed at Bournemouth. But Claire made a good point. She said, look, Traore's done a specific job in the first half when the battle's there to be won, and it's a physical battle. And, all right, he's had roughly an even share of it, maybe. It's a bit some ups and downs. But now the game is stretching. It's opening up a bit, and that's Doyle's game. Doyle's game, as we saw at Bournemouth, is picking passes through and finding gaps when the game stretches. So it might not have been his game in the first half, but it is now that the game is changing. The Wolves are going to try and find an equaliser. The game is hurrying up. And so there are those gaps for Doyle to play the passes into. And that might be a point. if Lemina is in there sort of, because remember, he's the only experienced one of those midfielders. The others are all slightly different options. So I could see that as a plan, that Traore was the right man for the first part of the game when it was more physical, and then Doyle was the man to pick off the gaps when he came on. So, yeah, I don't think Traore would say it was his best game. It was a tough game, but maybe he was the man that was needed for that job for the first 50-odd minutes.
This is something that Daz Hale pointed out last week, and it's a really good point. Obviously, you can only start 11 players, but because squads are so big and you have 5 substitutions now, it's not just a game when you could make 1 or 2 changes. You can afford to make a change at half-time. You can afford to have 2 warriors to grind a team down and then bring your footballers on later on.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think that's something that Lopetegui really was the first Wolves manager to really shine a light on, and said, look, 5 subs does change it. Because now you're almost, I'm slightly putting words in his mouth, but he was moving towards this. You can almost pre-program some substitutions. So whereas we've always been the way of thinking of you have the subs and you've got options there, but essentially you've got a starting 11 and then you use subs to replace people who are injured or blowing a bit or not having a very good game. Now managers are in a position where some of those subs, they can kind of think, well, he's the man for the first hour, and he's the man for when the game changes in the second half. And so it rewards managers who can think on their feet or have slightly more detailed tactical plans.
And credit to O'Neill, he seems to be nailing these substitutions at the right time at the moment. I mean, it's not always going to go that way, but he seems to be absolutely smashing them. The impact that certain players are having on, particularly Doyle, it seems to be happening at the right time, and credit for the manager for reading those moments.
Yeah, he's on a good run at the moment. And as you say, if you're going to take this route of, taking on creative formations and trying to come up with different plans, you're not going to get it right every time. And there will be a game sooner or later where it all goes wrong because he's come up with a plan. And for whatever reason, something happens there, it just doesn't work because he's not going to get it right every time. So I hope that he's a few in credit now because he will need it during the course of the season.
Absolutely. This one's been saved for you, especially Tyler. Moving on to Wolves man of the match, Mario Lemina.
Yeah, I thought it was outstanding. But I'm sort of looking at the midfield too, like the centre-backs. And I think it's a partnership and it's a tandem. And I think it's quite easy to forget that Newcastle are a very good team with 3 centre midfielders in there. And we had 2. So I find it hard-fetched to sort of say Boubacar didn't have his best game, because I thought as a 2 they were very good, to be honest. I thought Lemina just epitomised everything. I've been a bit critical, can he play, can he get us going forward? But he was in the second half, he was driving us on. I just thought it was outstanding. And if you add the goal, the defensive work, the character, then I thought it was a pretty faultless performance. But I think we touched upon it. There's options there now. And I think the Doyle substitution was perfect for that time. He's knocking at the door for a start, isn't he? There's no doubt about it. But, we were spoiled with Neves and Moutinho, obviously ability-wise. But now we seem to have 4 genuine options that we'd be pretty happy with if they were playing centre midfield for us. For me, it's still Lemina +1. Nocky does think I'll give him stick, but he's always in my team and he's always the first one. Can we bring in a Doyle for a game like Saturday where you'd like to think we might have a bit more of the ball, we might have to have a bit more of an impetus? I'm not saying that's the way to go, but what a nice problem to have, 4 genuine options that can all play there. Positive
problems. It's a fantastic position to be in. Moving on to Boubacar Traore's replacement, Doyle, Nocky. He was fantastic at Bournemouth. He had a similar impact again on Saturday. He's not going to smash through teams like the other 3 who are Warriors, and that's not taken away from them. They can play football as well. But Doyle looks like a Man City thoroughbred, doesn't he? He's a pure footballer that's changed 2 games on the bounce.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of picked up where he left off against Bournemouth, and I wasn't sure he'd be able to do that because I thought against Bournemouth and teams like Bournemouth, there was going to be plenty of space for him to play in. They're not going to shut the midfield down in the way that other teams do. They just don't have the quality to do it. So up against a Bruno Guimaraes and the strength they've got in that midfield area, you think he is not going to have that room to play. But I think someone linked him like a Moutinho kind of player, and I can sort of see that. Obviously, Moutinho's, was top class when he got to us, but he's got that kind of feel about him where he just seems to always be in space. He seems to be able to. He knows where the ball's going to come, and he can pick that pass. He's already a step ahead of the players around him, and he knows what he wants to do with it. And it's a massive attribute for any footballer to have. And he seems to have a real football brain. And he's been brought up the right way, as you say. He's come through the Man City Academy. They don't train poor footballers there. They're trying quality operators who can shift the ball. They can find the angles. They can find the pass, and they can get themselves into shooting positions when they need to. So it was an excellent display, and he's definitely knocking on the door now, and I think he's very, very close to linking up with Lamina in that midfield.
Absolutely, as Tyler said, it's great to have 4 genuine options. When if it was any 2 of the 4, I think Tyler's absolutely right. The first name for the midfield is Mario, and if you put any one of those others in, you're happy with it. I quite like the robust approach of having Traoré or João Gomez next to him to win the battle, tie the opposition out, and then bring the thoroughbred on to cut teams open. So it's tactically been brilliant, and it's working so far. Mike, moving on to 6-goal Hwang Hee-chan. What a turnaround. He's had a lot of criticism on this show, and sometimes that's probably been justified. The further he comes back, I don't like him. I want Hwang in the opponent's half and nowhere else, especially when he comes in the opponent when he's in the opponent's penalty box. He's got a talent that we need to tap into more. But yeah, Hwang Hee-chan.
Yeah, he's got a knack. And look, all goal scorers go through runs where they're in form and not in form. At the moment, he must feel as though he can have a pop from almost anywhere. And that's great, but the secret to it is he's getting into those positions. He's getting into positions where something might happen. And I bet if we studied throughout the game, there are lots of times he gets into a position and nothing happens, or the ball doesn't break to him. But he's not shy of making that run again. He doesn't seem to tire. He's always up, making himself available. So yes, he's been adept with finishing, but as much of the key to actually stroking the ball in is the work he's doing to make sure that if something happens to break, it's not going to miss out. And how many times over the last 2 or 3 years have Wolves done good work to get a ball into the penalty area and it goes begging, it gets to a defender first, there's nobody in there causing a problem. Now Hwang is there causing a problem because he's game and he's eager and enthusiastic. Did the World Cup change him? He seemed to get his sort of vigour back after the World Cup.
Dad said that last week after that goal he scored. Yeah,
maybe something like that. Look, if you'd been to the World Cup and scored a goal, you'd come back walking a bit taller, wouldn't you? So maybe it was that. But he just looks like a fella who enjoys playing football. He's glad to be there and he's up for it.
As Tyler, and I still think this is true. Hwang is a dream team player. He's pressing, his team contribution. He'll do exactly what the manager says. He's relentless. We've showed he's not afraid of a tackle. He puts himself about. He looks strong, and I think all the 3 of us regulars on the show are happy to eat humble pie because if he's whacking them goals in, I'm happy to look silly for everything that I've ever said about him. So fair play, Hwang Hee-chan. I hope it keeps coming. Last but not least, at the starting 11, is it on to you now, Tyler? Matthias Cunha. The most shots for Wolves this season, most shots on target, most dribbles, most duels won, and most pressures. So probably doesn't have the stats in terms of assists and goals that we'd like, but he's playing a real team player at the moment, and I think there's still more to come from Matthias Cunha.
Yeah, he's playing a critical role, isn't he, basically? Because I don't think there's that many strikers, forwards that can pick the ball up that deep and get you up the pitch so quickly. I can't really think of many that do it apart from him. Am I being a bit harsh saying his numbers and stats could be better with output, potentially? It's okay while Neto and Hwang are doing it, but now we're going to miss Neto. Can he start adding that to his game as well? But I think he's undervalued. I think the role he plays is absolutely key to how O'Neill wants Wolves to play. He wants a forward, he said it the other week when he was on, that can receive the ball, that can spin, that can play when he's in that space. So, yeah, I think he's winning me over and probably a lot of other people over. He's doing very good things. He'll know himself. The only thing that's lacking is the numbers, isn't it? But Hwang and Neto aren't going to keep scoring at the rate they're scoring. Hopefully he can step up when required.
I mean, it's a results business, but in terms of entertainment, when Cunha picks the ball up now from deep, it's fun. It's not quite at Dharma Traore levels, but he picks that ball up, he skips one challenge, he skips another challenge, the crowd's up, the volume's up, and Neto's doing the same. And this is why now it's more fun watching Wolves. It's no coincidence that hand in hand, the atmosphere is better because Wolves are more fun. The encouragement from the crowd encourages them to do it more, and then it's the snowball effect. So hopefully long may that continue. You are listening and watching to episode 77 of the Wolves Report with BBC Duggan's Mike Taylor, club captain Mark Knott, and director of football Chris Tyler. Unfortunately, the show has another section about VAR again. Mike, 3 games this season. Mike's hidden away now. We've run out of credit for Mike. This is Wolves have played 10 games. That's 3 games this season. So 30% ratio where there has been a very, very interesting, to be very polite, decision that has gone against Wolves. I watched on Monday, I don't know if anyone else did, the referee show on the Monday morning, Ref Watch. It was unanimous across the board. We've seen the pundits, even the most ardent of Newcastle fans have said, I don't really know how that's a penalty. Mike Taylor.
I can't be doing with conspiracy theories, and I understand why there are them, and I can understand why.
You're on the wrong show, Mike.
But I can't do because, and I don't want to go too far down, but because it doesn't answer the question of why would you pick on one club, and why would you make it Wolves or any other club? It doesn't add up from that point of view. With this particular one, and there's no way that you can explain it, and I'm not going to try, that ends up by saying that somehow the right decision was made. I do wonder whether it's slightly instructive in that I could see how the referee on the field came to give a penalty in the first place. Yes. From his standpoint, from where he was at the speed it happened, you can see how that could have happened. And 5 years ago, however long it was since we brought VAR in, we would have said, well, that's annoying. And we'd have probably still Wolves fans would have ranted about it, but there would have been, to some extent, you'd have said, well, okay, you can see how it happened. But VAR was supposed to do away with that. Whereas all that we've actually done is transfer the problem to somewhere else, because it's all subjective. I wonder if this is a case where the idea of clear and obvious has really not helped, because I think the point of introducing the clear and obvious idea was to stop VAR just intervening every 2 seconds where something might be happening on and off the field, but to say, okay, let's try and limit the amount of time that VAR has to climb in by saying, well, look, it's only if it's a real boo-boo. But then what happens is, I can imagine, and maybe we'll get the audio at some point, I can imagine that the referee then and looking on the VAR and saying, well, where's the really big error here? Ooh, and you can end up talking yourself out of what was a straightforward decision if you just looked at it. So by actually going through the process of saying, well, I'm looking for a clear and obvious thing, and well, there is a bit of contact, so it's not like it's missed it completely. You end up dragging yourself further away from what actually we could all see, which it didn't look like a penalty. So I think the process is the problem. And the more that they're trying to refine VAR by saying this is the process we're doing it in order to try and make it work properly, the further we seem to be getting away from actually making the right decision in the first place.
Nocky, I think Mike's nailed it there in terms of clear and obvious. Clear and obvious to me looks like something else to protect yourself, to hide behind. And whichever way it is, I am astounded they didn't say, you probably need to go and look at this one. We're not sure. Not that they should have to build a case to go, well, we don't think there's enough. There's clearly enough to look at, Nocky.
It's just crap, isn't it? The whole system's just utter garbage. I mean, you talk about clear and obvious. What every decision by definition that you get wrong is an obviously incorrect decision. So it's either right or it's wrong. You can't hide behind this clear and obvious that they seem to be doing at the moment. You've either got the decision correct or you've ballsed it up. Either way, you've got to make that adjustment to get to the right decision. And if you're not doing that, then You're shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, I've not liked VAR since I came in. I didn't want it in football, and it's done exactly what I thought it would do. But it has opportunities to win people like me round by looking at that decision. And I'm with Mike. If I'm the referee, I'm giving the penalty because it looks a
Of course,
penalty.
yeah, you can see from a fast point of view, you can understand why it's given. I get
absolutely.
that. But that isn't a reason to give it.
But just on that, though, surely the flip side to that argument is that they don't need to give it, because if it's a penalty, there's a system that's there that will tell them it's a penalty. Surely, if there's any doubt whatsoever, you don't give the penalty.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that. But
you're giving them, and they're not being chalked. You're giving someone a free shot at goal from 12 yards. It couldn't be any more of a benefit to that team. So I don't think they've got the realisation of what giving a penalty is. Don't give it, and if I've totally balls it up, my mate's going to tell me I have, and then I'll give it.
But
whereas
Tyler,
they're doing it the other way around at the moment, and it's not.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you then. But that's the problem, because now there's the clear and obvious. You need to forget about that. I'm interested in, was it a foul, yes or no? That's it. You just need to be clear and obvious.
The one thing that it's never going to work is, because Mike's right, it's subjective. 4 people could look at a foul and we could all have totally different opinions. It's not black and white. They took nearly 6 minutes at Bournemouth to give an offside, and that should be black and white, and it took 6 minutes.
Just to raise that on again, Tyler, with that though, you're saying black and white. That I can see a little bit why the Luton one's subjective. The opening game of the season with Onana, all right, there's nobody I know, unless you're an ardent Man United fan and the referee, that doesn't think that's a penalty. There's nobody I know that said to me about on Saturday that that's a penalty. So somebody in a job who's paid to do it professionally, because have you seen one person that said on Saturday, yeah, that penalty should be given?
No, however, you can only be 100% sure on goal lines and offsides. They're the two you can only be 100% sure on. Yeah. For me, I just don't get why the ref's giving it in the first place, because it's not a stone wall, and we all know that. And then you make the right decision because your mate says, well, actually, you might have another look at it. The fact that he hasn't even gone to look at it.
Well, that's the bit I'm stunned about.
It's just absolute bizarre. And I did used to think there was more behind it, but I do now genuinely think it is pure incompetence. They do not know what they're doing.
See, I get what I understand your point.
I wonder. No, sorry, go on.
No, so I understand your point around why is he giving it. For me, I think we've got to be really careful, because what you don't want to do is completely take these decisions away from the referee. Because at first glance, I thought it was a penalty.
Yeah, me too.
So I want the referee to make the decision he thinks is correct at the time, which for me was the penalty. I've got no issue with him giving that. What should then happen is VAR should not be scared to send their mate to the monitor so they don't make him look daft. They should be making that decision. It should be a retrospective yellow card for the player who's throwing himself to the ground. You've got that decision wrong. Sorry, but you've got that decision wrong because you've been conned. It's not inept to get a decision wrong. I've got no issue with them making mistakes. But what I want to see is that I want to see VAR work the way it's supposed to work. Sorry, mate, you've got that wrong. Go and have another look at it. He has a look at it, and yeah, okay, I've been conned. Here's your booking. We carry on with the game. So I don't want to take decisions away from the referee, because if you're going to do that, you might as well scrap the ref, you might as well scrap the lino, and we'll just go purely with an automated system, which none of us want to see. So it's not about the on-field errors, that they will happen. The Onana one should have been a penalty. We all know that, but they've got to watch an entire football field. So there's going to be times where they miss certain activities that have gone on the pitch. But that's where your VAR can win people around, by getting those decisions correct. So that's the improvements that we need. But I think it's so woolly and it's so subjective, and there's no, the clear and obvious thing's absolutely killing it. And Howard Webb's come out and said that he wants less intervention from VAR unless it's clear and obvious. So now what you're basically doing is saying we're just going to go with the on-field decision from now on, which is completely against what the whole point of it is. So they need to rip it up. If they're going to keep it, rip it up, start again, and go back to basics, because the whole thing at the minute is just wrong.
Webb was brought in to do it, and it's got worse.
He's made it worse, yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, I wonder if this trying to do that and trying to make it, I don't know, more transparent or more logical or more consistent, they've ended up creating a problem. Because again, we don't know. Maybe we'll get the audio of it. This is entirely a theory as to why it could have taken so long at the weekend. So, okay, the penalty's been given, and the VAR are looking at it and they say, right, we're looking for a clear and obvious reason, clear and obvious. We must have that in our mind to not give this. Right. What are the clear and obvious things that could have gone wrong? That there's no contact. Well, there is a little bit of contact. So
yeah, there was.
At the end, there's contact, but the players drop before.
At the end, there's contact. So, now that's the one that missed. How they could have missed that Cher's already going. But nevertheless, so you work through these step by step, and in each one, you can come to, well, there was a little bit of contact, and did he get the ball? Well, no, he didn't really get the ball, and so you end up talking yourself out of. Whereas if you just looked at it, didn't know what the decision was, is this a penalty or not, you'd have said that's not a penalty. So by trying to make the process more logical, you actually end up missing the overall point, which is just look at it. Because it's a subjective decision, you can't break it down. So I worry now that by trying to make the system more refined and trying to make it better, it just ends up falling to pieces completely. And we've got so far away from where we started from, which was to have another pair of eyes for the referee, which is essentially what it was.
I think the key thing here is, and I don't think referees believe this or act like it, I don't mind if referees make mistakes. VAR is there to protect you at big moments. That's fine. Don't be afraid to call your mate out who's made a mistake. It's your job. We're human. We all make mistakes. VAR is there to help you find the correct decision. No one's going to care if you got it wrong. You're human. It's a ferociously fast game. It's fast. It's furious. On the first sight, all four of us thought it was a penalty because from that angle, it looked like a penalty. But VAR is there to protect you, and it was clear for me. And on there, I don't know. It just feels like to me, the Mike Dean thing hasn't really helped. When he's he's been mate. He's having a bad game. That's not really helped the situation, and it just feels like obviously Anthony Taylor, massive referee. I think he's one of England's FIFA referees, the main ones. You don't want to overrule one of the big dogs, and it just feels like that. I might be wrong, but you know what? I don't mind if you make a mistake because VAR is there to correct it. Use that tool. It doesn't matter.
I've got a slight issue with that, Ryan, which is the whole point of us ending up with VAR in the first place, because when referees did make a mistake at full pace, everybody did mind a lot. Mm-hmm. And so, again, unlike Nokia, I wasn't a big fan of VAR coming in, but the big argument for bringing in VAR was because everybody was unhappy with the standard of referees. And that's how we ended up with it. If everybody had been I mean, I hear what you're saying and I agree with you, but if everybody had been of that opinion 10 years ago and saying, well, sometimes the referees are wrong, then we might not have ended up with this at all in the first place.
I definitely get what you're saying, Mike, and I agree. But my point, I don't care as much now if you're prepared to use VAR to correct yourself. That maybe I wasn't clear in what I was saying.
I would go with that, but just as a slight ring.
No. Before, when there was no VAR, if you're having a howler, of course it's going to upset you. But now you've got a tool.
Football being the game, it is though. Yeah. It's because it's a passionate game. People that aren't necessarily certainly in the stadium. You don't have a conversation like the one that we're having now.
No, the group chat didn't look like this at full time, Mike.
On that piece around standards, though, I'd be pretty confident if I asked you do you think the standards of refereeing are getting better or worse? I think we'd all probably say they're getting worse.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm with you, Ryan. I'm for people making mistakes. And if we saw an increase in standard and things getting better, I think we'd all buy into it a lot more. But we all go to the games every week and we feel it's on the decline. And I think Stephen Warnock nailed it in what he said for me yesterday. Absolutely nailed it. And we've said the same. It's the best league in the world. It's got more money than any other league. And we're still talking about it. And it's ridiculous ultimately. But, we ain't going anywhere, is it? So we're going to be talking about it again. So
and this ends this week's section on VAR, which will be back again next weekend. I am absolutely sure. You're listening and watching episode 77 of the Wolves Report with BBC WM's Mike Taylor, Director of Football Chris Tyler, Club Captain Mark Knock, and your part-time host Ryan Lester. We've got time for a couple of questions before we move on to the team for Sheffield United and the hole that Pedro Neto leaves. I think we know the answer to this question, but it's an interesting one brought up by Greg, regular contributor. Do you see Sarabia and Silva being moved on in January to accommodate the signings Gary O'Neill has indicated he wants? Nocky.
I think so. Sarabia is not getting the game time that I thought he probably would get this season. And when he has come on, he's flattered to deceive. Silva just doesn't look like he's he's set for this kind of football. I think he needs to move away. So yeah, I think they'll both go in the window, and I think there'll be a few more as well.
Let's fly through these. Greg, as always, thanks for your contribution. Bridget asks, it's an interesting one. John Percy article regarding financial fair play, having been met. Thoughts on that, please? I think there was something on a podcast yesterday via former Wolves correspondent Tim Spires that he insinuated that Wolves weren't clear of financial fair play. The Percy article would seem to suggest that Wolves are probably better than Tim had suggested. Whether Wolves had spoke to John Percy to get the article out there, I don't know. But it was an interesting article, Tyler, from John regarding Wolves' financial fair play and looking for a striker in January. But just sort of feeding on from Greg's question, I think Wolves will have some money to spend because I think now Sarabia probably will go. I think we'll probably see Silva go as well. So.
Was that a question? Sorry.
I'm just trying to merge everything together.
Yeah, I'm thinking it seems we're not fully out of... What's the phrase? I don't even know what I'm talking about. We're not fully clear, are we? It seems that's the case, and they're being very cautious about it. With the noise about Everton, it's probably the right thing as well. On with Nocky, I'd expect those two, Johnny, maybe a couple of loans. I don't see us spending money unless we move one or two out, and I think they're just going to play it very safe because of the repercussions they might face. What's more important? Gambling a little bit with a new manager and going in a new direction, or having 12-point deduction and potentially getting relegated. So I think they're playing on the safe side.
But we've seen that
the point deduction to Everton that will, unpopular though it was in the summer, that will entirely justify Wolves' approach.
Yeah,
it just will, and I know people didn't like it in the summer, and I'm sure a lot of people still don't like it. But if Everton have even 1 point deducted, it will justify that.
Yeah, that was I was about to follow up with that. It's from what I gather. I mean, there's a few teams that are being looked at. Wolves, one of them potentially. Wolves have sold for a reason to try and clear it. £53 million on the last transfer, right? Which at the time it looked bad, but it Wolves seem to look better for that now. So to balance the books, make a bit of profit to keep us safe. If Everton do get punished, as Mike says, then you can only say, well, Wolves have done the right thing then, and if they come down on Everton, they won't be the first team because there are other teams that are sailing close to the wind.
Do we think they will? Do we think they'll get the points deduction?
I think so. I think it. Now, I don't know this, so my opinion would be they're coming after Everton because they may have broke the rules and they may have known they broke the rules allegedly and keep going. And that's my opinion. I don't know. That's not fact. But if they have and they don't punish them, there is absolutely no point to financial fair play. If a team is going to break the rules and they know they broke them, allegedly, then they should punish them because they're in there to protect the game. So if you broke them, somebody needs to be the first one that's properly punished. And if it's Everton, so be it.
Yeah, I'm kind of sceptical that they will because I think there's a few big fish that they won't want to go after that are going to be affected by this.
It'll be the end of the season, and it'll be a deduction that's not enough to get them relegated.
Yeah, it'll be they'll probably deduct some 3 or 4 points, and then there'll be a few that are held in case they break financial fair play again.
Some bonus points.
They'll defer another 7 or 8 points. I just don't. I see a slap on the wrist. I see a fine and a small points deduction, which isn't going to affect them this season. But I'll be amazed if they get 12 points. I'll be absolutely stunned.
Just turning that into your attention, Mike. If Everton are found guilty of the suggested charges and they aren't punished accordingly, doesn't that leave the door open for everyone else to say, well, you only knocked Everton 2 points off, so we're going to do the same, and that's the most we expect? Because there is up to a 12-point fine for the worst case scenario for breaking the rules. So if they don't hit them with the worst case scenario, what's the point of the rules? And is it encouraging others to break the rules if the punishment is minimal?
I think we're going to have to wait until we really see the details of what the Everton case is and any other cases that come. So I think that's hard to judge now. So I'd be reluctant to prejudge. I understand what you're saying. And it does feel like somewhere along the line, if FFP is to mean anything, then a line has got to be drawn in the sand somewhere. And it is going to be difficult for the football authorities to do it because somebody's going to be the first. Of course, we're talking about Premier League level. Obviously, at lower levels, several clubs already have been, picked off for, and penalised. So it will be a different level again of stepping it up to get to somewhere which I think most people ultimately are generally in agreement with. He's controlling the costs in football. I think most fans would go along with it. The problem is nobody wants to be the first to have their club say, well, we're not going to spend too much money. That was the problem. In the summer when Wolves were not wanting to spend, I don't think it was because Wolves fans necessarily think that their club should be spending crazy amounts of money. But it's the fact that nobody wants to feel that they're going to be the first club penalised. But somebody's going to be. And it will be, we'll have to calibrate everything from that. So I think it's really hard to judge until we know more about what the details are. But I think Wolves are very wise to be cautious.
Yeah, so absolutely. And I'm sure this is going to go on. And
sure.
And it's reported that the Premier League want Everton to be fined 12 points, but it's going to go to someone independent. That'll be fascinating going forward to see that. And then, as you say, Mike, earlier on, it will justify Wolves' reaction in the summer to protecting themselves, future-proofing themselves for any kind of deductions. We
might also say, just very quickly, that that's the responsible thing to do. Because it's not forgetting points deductions and sporting sanctions. Ultimately, if you keep spending money you haven't got, you're going down a very slippery slope. And I mean, how many clubs are there that going to have a look at? Sheffield Wednesday were asking their fans for money today to keep going.
That's outrageous. Outrageous.
Let's not even go there. But look, if while I understand that everybody wanted Wolves to spend, and we could all see the need for it, it's hard to criticise a club for saying, actually, we want to try and be a little bit more responsible here. Yeah. Because forget the sporting sanctions, there are other things at play, which is we've got to try and, not spend money we haven't got.
Yeah, absolutely understandable. Moving on to Saturday's game, Wolves go to Bramall Lane and face Sheffield United on 3:00 kickoff. Delighted to be joining Tyler and Nocky for an away day out. It's going to be a tough game. Another question sort of lead us into this. Tyler, Nocky, don't mind whichever one of you goes on to this first. Steve Lees and Paul Somerset have both raised. How do we line up against an injury-ravaged Sheffield United without Pedro Neto?
I don't think we changed too much. I mean, I'd like to maybe think Bellegarde comes in, but he seems to have disappeared the last couple of games. The other choice, I've got a little sneaky. He might put Doyle out there. I know he did play
like 3-5-2.
Yeah. The other choice, of course, is you play Kalajic and you move Cunha out. I don't really want to see that because I think that Cunha's effective where he is. So I've just got a little sneaky that he might start Doyle in that position.
In what position? Sorry.
I think he might play him wide. I think he might play him wide in the attack.
Yeah, that'll be. I mean, Doyle's quality is unquestionable. I think he could deliver. I just worry that will slow us down in terms of the speed. I mean, I don't care as long as Wolves win.
No, I agree. I wouldn't play him now. I'd like to see Bellegarde come in, but I've just got a little sneaky he might play there. That's just. I know he did a couple of times Sheffield United playing that position, so I just think he might push him a little bit wide. But hopefully Bellegarde comes in because then it's a like for like. You're not affecting anything else and you just put him in that position.
Tyler?
Yeah, spot on. I think if Bellegarde's fit, it's a big if, isn't it? I think he hasn't been training, but he comes in. You've got Knocker's option, or you've got Sasa with Cunha and Hwang off him. I'm a bit with Knocker. I think that slows us down quite heavily. The other option is you go 3-5-2. You match them and give Cunha and Hwang free rein, don't you? Basically, but he's come up, like Mike said, he's come up trumps, hasn't he? Gary has in the last few tactical decisions. So hopefully he gets this one right as well.
Well, Mike, this is probably the manager's biggest tactical hurdle he's faced so far. Your best player, the player that's on fire, linked to a January move. Most assists in the Premier League, beating any defender in his way. It's a hard task replacing Pedro Neto. So how do you see it going forward into Saturday?
It is when they haven't I wouldn't say they've built the team around him, but certainly the focus of the team has been using him. He's been your guy in form. Let's find a way to give him the ball as much as we can. So Bellegarde seems a reasonably natural fit. But there are other options. And also, Bellegarde hasn't played for quite a while now. He had the suspension. Then he's had a calf.
Best part of a month now, yeah.
Yeah, so that's cool. So he might not necessarily be ready to go straight back in. So I think there are other options. We can move Hwang out there a bit and play, play Doyle and, play Doyle and Traore and Lamina. in the centre and have Hwang out there. So, I think there are various combinations, and Gary O'Neill might have come up with one that we haven't thought of, but Bellegarde slotting straight in if he's ready to go would be the sort of simplest option.
Yeah, that feels the most natural, because Bellegarde looks like in his first, I think it was his first game against Liverpool, sort of played as a 10, beat a few people, looks creative, comfortable on the ball. Could you push Cunha then more forward if Bellegarde's going to sit in as the 10, as that guy that comes and collects? It's going to be interesting for Sheffield United to work out, because we can't work it out ourselves.
Well, then you could play Hwang to his right and Aït-Nouri to his left.
Yeah. Yeah, depending if it's wing backs.
Wants to get up there, yeah.
If it's 4-4-2 wing backs, yeah, it's this one isn't a positive problem, because Neto is a huge loss. But if you've got someone of Bellegarde's quality and he's ready to start, I think that's the most natural solution. But equally, as Nocky said, Doyley's full of quality, and if the manager believes we have technically better footballers than Sheffield United, then go 3-5-2 and match them up and make it toe to toe, and believing you can go. But it's big predicament going forward. Getting to the end of the show now, that hour and 5 minutes has flown by. The three pundits are all on overtime, which is going to drag us out of the Christmas bonus era. But it's on time to that part of the show when we talk about predictions. Mike Taylor, Sheffield United v Wolverhampton Wanderers. First goal scorer and score, please.
It's nice to be going to a game with Wolves' definitive favourites. Or let's hope it's nice. And I would take Wolves to win 3-0.
And your first scorer?
Oh, the first goal scorer. Who can it be but the goal machine, Hwang himself?
You're never going to make it on this show with that kind of attitude.
No, I was going to say.
Coming on here with that positivity, Mark. I don't know who you think you are.
Yeah, why not? I wasn't going to say that, and then it just came out. So 3-0 and Hwang.
Nocky, try and top Mike Taylor. Good luck with that.
It just feels like such a Wolves thing to do, to go there and get beat, doesn't it? You just feel they've got 1 point all season. They've lost 9 games. It just feels right for us to go there and put in a stinker and get beat 2-0. I can feel it. I could just almost taste it.
However,
I can't possibly back that. So I'll go for a 2-0 Wolves win. Cunha with the opener.
Tyler.
I think it's a hat-trick of Sasa late winners, so 1-0. Him to come off the bench and nod one at him.
We'll take that. Ever since I've not said Cunha to score the first goal, Wolves haven't lost the game. I do not believe in superstition. However, I will not change it. Cunha will not score the first goal, and Wolves will win 2-0, and Ryan Aït-Nouri will score the first goal. This has been episode 77 of the Wolves Report. Thank you to club captain Mark Knock. Thank you, director of football Chris Tyler, and BBC WM's Mike Taylor. Because if Liquid Gold had a voice, it would sound like Mike Taylor of the Wolves.